All right. So welcome everyone to this special seminar presented by the MedTech Talent Accelerator. My name is Jesse Ehrlich. I am the McGill Program Manager for the MedTech Talent Accelerator, which is an NSERC Create training program, a collaborative program between McGill University and Ryerson University. So before I introduce our speaker, I'll just give a quick overview of the program. It's an industry-focused training program for graduate students at McGill and Ryerson University. So what we do is we train master's and PhD students towards the end of their degrees in industry-focused training topics through a self-paced online course. And that is before we help place these grad students in industry internships in MedTech. And these internships last 4 months for master's students and 8 months for PhDs. The program also features a hackathon and a job shadow and industry seminars like today, which are open to the public. So I want to thank our speaker today, Clarisse Bascans, who is the co-founder and CEO of Avisio. And today she will present key steps in regulatory affairs and quality management for a MedTech startup. So on behalf of the program, thank you, Clarisse, for presenting today, and I'll hand it off to you. So the floor is yours. Just please note afterwards, Clarisse will present and we'll have time for Q&A. So please post your questions in the chat and I will moderate the Q&A. So Clarisse, thank you again, and take it away.
Well, thank you, Jesse. So yeah, I will introduce some key steps in regulatory affairs and quality management when you are a MedTech startup. So yeah, please feel free to ask any question you have and we'll have time at the end to answer them. First, I will begin with what is Avisio, an overview of what we're doing. Basically, we are a consulting company for medical devices companies. Our mission is really to facilitate the commercialization of medical technologies because we want to be sure that there will be good technologies for our patients here in Canada and in the world. Our approach is really to raise awareness about quality management and regulatory affairs early in the product development cycle. So we do a lot of awareness for startups so that they understand that quality and regulatory are not only things to be done for commercialization, but also when you design and develop your product. And really our approach is to have a personalized QMS so that your quality management system become an asset within your company. Our services are QMS creation. So QMS is for quality management system, implementation, improvement, and maintenance. We also do audits and trainings relating to quality management system standards and basic aspects. We are a team of 4 experts and we combine more than 10 years of experience, and we are all lead auditor for Aviso. The goals of this seminar today is, of course, not to give you all the details about regulatory affairs and quality management because we will have to last this seminar for a week, I think. So it will only last 30 to 40 minutes. But what I want to give you is an overview of all the regulatory and quality requirements when you are in the development of a medical device. Also want to help you develop your preliminary strategy and plan towards the compliance of your product and of your company. I hope this seminar will help you identify the key topics and standards you have to look at. And also, I think this seminar will help you ask the good question to your mentors regarding quality affairs and regulatory affairs. So first, I want to be sure that we all speak about the same thing. The context is about medical device when you're developing a medical device. The definition is on the screen. What you need to remember is that the medical device is intended to be used on human beings and not animals, and it's to treat or diagnose or prevent a medical condition. Also, when we talk about regulatory affairs and quality management, I want you to think about not only the fact that you have to go through regulatory affairs to get your product on the market, but also to think about the patient outcomes. And in fact, the regulatory affairs are really a way to ensure that your product is safe and efficient. So when you ask for the FDA, for example, to look at your product, you really want to be sure that your product will not harm anyone, so it's safe, and that your product actually works as you say it does, so it's efficient. The quality management is not only about the product, but it's about your company, and it's to ensure quality and efficiency of your activities. When you have a quality management system, it helps you do the things well in a repeatable way and with accountability. So it's really what you have to think about when you think about regulatory affairs and quality management. Now, the question can be, when in my journey as a startup, as a MedTech startup, do I have to think about regulatory affairs and quality management? Well, I would say as soon as possible. I took this scheme from Stephen Less at the Santec in Montreal. It shows the path to innovation, to research, to commercialization. So there are a lot of things, but what I wanted you to see is the fact that at the beginning you have an unmet clinical need and you build your proof of concept, but then you will soon need the QMS and the regulatory approvals to go further. And what is missing maybe is to think very early on about your regulatory strategy. And that's what I want to talk to you a bit about today. So first we'll begin with regulatory affairs, and then we'll get into quality management. So first, when we are talking about regulatory affairs, you have to understand that you will have to think about regulatory affairs for each country in which you will sell your medical device. So today I will talk mostly about Health Canada and the FDA, but if you want to sell your product in Europe, for example, you will have to get the CE marking, and it's with the European Commission. Here I put the link for the regulation, the different regulation that you have to follow to ensure that your product is safe and efficient for each country. So once you chose in which country you're going to sell your medical device, you have to build your regulatory affairs strategy for each country. This is not the recipe for a good regulatory affairs strategy, but it's good steps to think about when you're doing the strategy. So first you will need to establish the intended use, and I will go back to that in a few minutes, and the classification of the device. Then you will have to choose a regulatory pathway. Then you will have to prepare for your pre-submission meetings with different agencies, so the Health Canada or the FDA, because they have to get to know you and get to know your product. And it's good to have pre-submission meetings with them so that you know that you're on the good track and your submission goes smoothly after these meetings. Then you will have to prove product security and efficacy through, for example, feasibility studies or clinical trials. And then what is really important is to have a timeline to know when you're gonna do your regulatory submissions. So we'll go through the steps into more details in the few minutes going. So first, there is a classification for medical devices that will impact your regulatory strategy. And this classification is based on the risk level of your device. And what is gonna impact the risk level and the classification is the intended use of your product. The classification is kind of similar between the countries, but it's also different. So the classification is dependent on the jurisdiction. For example, in Canada, you have class 1, class 2, class 3, and class 4 devices. The class 1 is for the less risky products, and when you have high risk products, it's a class 4, for example. For the FDA, it only goes from class 1 to class 3. And Europe, it's class 1, class 2A, class 2B. So it's kind of similar, but different. If we take examples, for example, for class 1, it can be hospital bed, class 2, a bit more risky MRI equipment. Then we go into implantable devices, such as hip prostheses. And then class 4 could be pacemakers, for example. You see that the risk for the patient, for example, that could lead to death is more and more important. So for the classification, there are regulations, so you can find them on the Health Canada and FDA website, and you can see which classification you'll be in, and that's something that you have to verify with the agency, for example, during pre-submission meetings. Here, I want to talk to you about intended use and indication for use, because there are sometimes mismatch and you have to be careful about that. The intended use is something that will affect the classification of your device and also the code for medical reimbursements. And it's really what your device is meant to do. So it does not describe what the device is intended to be used for. This is the indication for use. The indication for use is the reason you want to use the device for. So basically, I want to use this device for patients with cardiovascular problems. This is the indication for use. But the intended use is what your device is meant to do and what you're claiming on the labeling of your product. It's good practice to keep the intended use statement concise, but you of course have to detail all the fundamental claims you're saying on your product. If I want to give you an example, for example, a scalpel with an intended use stated for cutting flesh would be a class 1 device. But if it is stated as being specifically for use on an eyeball, for example, it will be class 3 because it's not the same risk. And it will maybe be easier to get a code of reimbursement for an eyeball, for a scalpel for an eyeball, than for just cutting flesh. So that's why the intended use is really important for your regulatory strategy, but also for your business case. Because when you have a higher risk product, it will be more difficult and you will have more work to do to prove the safety and efficacy of your product. We'll come back to that a bit later. Once you have your classification, it's a bit more easier to choose the regulatory pathway you have to follow. If we take the FDA, you have 3 choices. The first one is the well-known 510K. It's a pre-market notification. It's where you have your device that is really similar to another one that is already on the market in the US. You can ask for a pre-market notification saying that your device is similar, and so it is safe and efficient as it is similar to a product that the FDA has already authorized. A second pathway is the de novo. It's when you have a moderate risk device, you're asking for a new product code, but you don't have that much to do with regard to the PMA, which is the third pathway. It's for the high risk products, and you have a lot of work to do to prove that your product is safe and efficient. Of course, certain pathways, I'm talking about the FDA pathways, take more time and more resources than others. So it can be a business choice to choose the 510K or the de novo. Sometimes, for example, even if your product is similar to one on the market, you want to stand out from competitors, so you will ask for a de novo instead of a 510K or things like that. And even if you have a product, for example, that can be similar to another product, but you want to add specifications, then maybe you can enter the market under a lower classification that already exists. So choose a 510K, for example, because it's easier, and then complexify the product afterwards. It can be a solution also. You will have to see if it's possible within your regulatory strategy. For Health Canada, there are two ways to enter the market, and it's really linked to your classification, to the device classification. For example, if you manufacture Class 1 devices, you will ask for MDL, a medical device establishment license, or when you're an importer or distributor of Class 1 to 4 devices, it's also a MDL. But if you manufacture a Class 2 or plus, Class 3 or 4 device, you have to ask for a medical device license, the homologation, MDL. That's kind of the same thing, so be careful. The big difference between the two is the medical device establishment license is on your establishment, so you can have one for different products, whereas the medical device license is really an authorization of your device in particular. So when you have chosen your regulatory pathway, then you have to prove product security and efficacy. You do that by a lot of different, a lot of work, basically. But here I want to show you what kind of standards you can use to prove safety of the device. First of all, you will need to do a risk analysis and a risk mitigation. The ISO standard that I put there is the international standard known for risk analysis in medical devices. Then you have to be careful about usability engineering. Be sure that your device, you took into account the user in the design of your device. So will your product be practical to use, convenient to use? That's something that you can verify via usability engineering and human factors. So here is the standard that can help you do that. Also, the safety of your product can be verified through standards such as the medical electrical equipment standard or the biocompatibility standard. For example, if you have an implant, you will surely need some biocompatibility tests. And of course, the efficacy of your product, you will prove that through design verification and validation. And at one time, you will maybe need to do clinical studies on humans. And for that, you will need to ask an ITA or an IDE, depending on where you're at in Canada or in the US. So this is to prove the security and efficacy on the product. Within the company, you will also need to prove that you manufacture, design your product in a controlled environment. So you will have to prove that you have a quality management system compliant to the required standards. We'll come back to that just after when we will talk about quality management. So I hope I gave you some tools for the regulatory strategy. This is not the focus and the expertise of AVISIO, but we're working with a partner which is called BML, which is one of our dear partners when we're working with a medical device company. We're working in pair on the regulatory strategy and the quality management system. So what I wanted to tell you about regulatory strategy is the fact that it's going to dictate also your marketing claims. For example, if you say that your intended use is for an eyeball, for example, for the scalpel, you can't say on your marketing tools that it's for something else because it's not what you, what the FDA or Health Canada have authorized. So all your regulatory strategy will influence your business. So that's why the regulatory strategy must support the business strategy and the other way around too. So to be sure you found the good regulatory strategy, you have to consider the clinical need while balancing the limitation to the business case. your marketing claims. So you also have to be careful about the work to be done, because if you're saying, I want to build a scalpel for an eyeball, then it will be class 3 and you will have more work to do to prove that the product is safe and efficient. So yeah, as soon as possible, get the product and the business teams to work together so that to find this balance between the business claims and the regulatory claims. So now we're going to talk about quality management. I will try to give you an overview of what is a quality management system, why do you need it, and what are the first steps to build one within your company. So why do you need a quality management system? Well, first, because it's mandatory to put your product on the market. So it's to support regulatory affairs and obtain the medical device license you want to have to put your product on the market. But also it's to ensure quality and efficiency of your activities, because within your quality management system, you're going to plan all your activities, you're going to document them, and so you know what you're doing and you know who is doing what. So you're doing things in a repeatable way and you keep the traceability of everything. So it helps you support safety and efficacy of your medical device. A third reason is to have control of what you are producing through the production process you will put in place and the test you will do during the production. And you will have the means to act when things are not going the way intended. What I mean by that is that if there is a problem on the market with a product you commercialized, then with a quality management system, you will know which batch was it coming from, your product, you know when it was tested, and so you can go back to the real problem. And also you can bring back all the product that were in the same batch so that you avoid any other problems. A quality management system is also a good way to structure your organization and facilitate the onboarding, because as a lot of things are documented, everybody knows what they should be doing and where they can find all the information they're looking for. Also, if someone quits the company, all the work this person has been doing will be documented. So you won't have to call him and say, I'm sorry, where did you put all these things? We can't find them. Within a quality management system, this thing doesn't happen normally. So that's a great way to have everything at the same place. So now, how do I build my quality management system, and on which requirements should I base myself to create my QMS? Also, how do I know if I'm compliant to these standards? First of all, I wanted to tell you that the FDA has its own regulations for the quality system. So we will talk about ISO during this presentation, because ISO and 21 CFR Part 820 are kind of the same requirements. The FDA has said that they're gonna transition to ISO in the next few years, but right now it's kind of the same, but it's still different. So for the FDA, you have to follow the quality system regulation, which is 21 CFR Part 820. And for all the other markets, it's the international standard that is called ISO 13485, which is the requirement for a quality management system, specifically within the medical devices industry. So you have to read these standards and follow the requirements. And how do you know that you're compliant to these standards? Then you do internal audits, we call them. It's kind of an inspection that you do yourself on your quality management system, and it's to assure you're in compliance with the standards, but also to determine if your QMS is effective or not. Because when doing internal audits, you will verify everything, and maybe you will find that your QMS is not adapted to your company because your employees don't understand it, or things like that. Internal audits are like training and practice for the external audits, which are done by third party or the FDA, and which give you kind of the certificate you'll be waiting for, saying you're compliant to ISO. For the FDA, it's an FDA inspection, but for ISO audits, it's third-party organizations that are doing the audits. They are called auditing organizations in the US, registrars in Canada, and notified bodies in Europe. So this third-party organization come into your facilities and verify that your QMS is compliant. We're talking about ISO audits, but more recently, there is the MDSAP audit. I will tell you a bit more about that just after. And the FDA now accepts MDSAP audit reports as a substitute for routine agency inspection. So that means if you have an MDSAP certificate, maybe the FDA won't come inspect your quality management system. So maybe you heard about MDSAP. It was kind of a new thing in the last years. In fact, it's just a new audit program. It's called MDSAP for Medical Device Single Audit Program. It's 5 jurisdictions that have come together and have said, okay, if people want to sell their medical device into Canada, USA, Brazil, instead of having to do 1 audit per jurisdiction, they can only do 1 audit for all the jurisdictions. So that's a new thing, and that's kind of great, but it's a bit something that frightened the Europeans because they don't understand MDSAP. But that's a way to do only 1 audit, whereas before you should have done like 5 different audits to have the right to sell into the different markets. So these 5 countries recognize MDSAP certificates, but only 1 asked for it to get the license, and it's Canada. So if you want to sell a product, a medical device in Canada, you will have to show your MDSAP certificate. So you will have to ask for MDSAP audit, and here I put a link so that you find the auditing organization that are authorized to do the MDSAP audit. I wanted you to understand how does it work, the certification, because you have a certificate at the end of the audit if all went well. It's often a 3-year cycle. You have the first year where it is your certification audit, and it's in 2 stages. First, you have the documentation audit. So the auditors will look at your documents and will look at if it's compliant or not to the requirements, to the standards. Then they will come to your facilities and look at what you're doing. Like they won't look at what you said you were doing, that they will really look at what you're doing. So they will interview people, they will interview management, and they will look for proof that your quality system is working. That's why we recommend that when you do your first certification audit for your quality management system, you have your quality management system running from 3 to 6 months so that you have enough proof. We will see in the next minutes what proofs are. Basically, it records like results of your activities. So during the stage 2, they will look at what you're doing in the records, and if everything went great and you didn't have any non-conformities, you will have your certificate. And then they will come the year after, so it's an external audit per year, and they will do a surveillance audit. Here, they won't do again the documentation audit, they will only do the stage 2 audit, and they may not audit the whole QMS. Maybe they will choose only several processes, and it will be the same for year 3. But then you will have to begin a new 3-year cycle and redo a certification audit. Okay, so let's get into what is a QMS. when we talk about quality management, you may have heard quality assurance and quality control. So I wanted us to be on the same page. The quality assurance, it's kind of a plan for it. It's all the planned activities that you can demonstrate our plan so that it will be a product of quality. The quality control is the check, is the inspections, the tests you're doing so that you prove that, yeah, the activities worked, my product is safe. So sometimes we talk about the umbrella of quality. When you put quality assurance and quality control together, you get your quality management system. And the definition I use for quality management system is the following one. Your quality management system is all your organizational processes that ensure quality and help your organization meet the requirements expected by your stakeholders. We'll come back to what is a quality management in a minute, but first I wanted to tell you that the quality management is really about the process approach. So just so that we're on the same page, a process is a series of actions which are carried out with some input resources and are carried out in order to achieve a particular result, an output. And basically the process approach is to say that all your processes are connected. So for example, in a company, we can think about the sales process, the purchasing process, the onboarding process. All of that should be interrelated to build your quality management system. I will try to show you what is a quality management system related to ISO requirements with this scheme. So we said that the quality management system is all your organizational processes that ensure quality and help you meet the requirements expected by your stakeholders. Within a MedTech startup, your main stakeholders will be the regulatory agencies and your customers. So you should take their requirements as your input into your realization process. And then the output, of course, would be your medical device and will also be the regulators and the customers' feedback. This is your quality management system. With ISO 13485, we follow the PDCA cycle, so the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. It's really important to think about that during your quality management system implementation because you always want to plan, do, check, act. We will see with the different clauses of ISO how you can do that. So first, within ISO 13485, you have different clauses. The fourth one is the general requirements for your QMS. Then the clause 5 is about management responsibility. In a quality management system, it's really important to understand the importance of leadership. Your QMS will not work if only 1 or 2 persons in your company are working on it. It's really something that everyone should be responsible, and the management should really show leadership into explaining that the quality management system is important, that meeting regulators and customers' requirements is important. So the management should put resources in place and should plan everything for the QMS to stay effective. So how do you plan your activities? Well, first you do resource management. If you know that your customer wants 100 items of your product, then you should plan for that, and you should plan for the people who will have to work, the machines you will have to use. So basically the planification. The requirements for this part of your QMS are in the clause 6 of ISO. The clause 7 is the big part of ISO and of your quality management system. It will be the product realization. So everything related to your medical device, that's the do of the PDCA cycle. Then the check will be in the clause 8 about measurement, analysis, and improvement. Because when you will be doing the design and development and the production of your product, you will have to do some monitoring to see if your product meets the requirements, to see if the machines are working, and so on. So you will then analyze the data and see if a problem might be occurring. And what is good with ISO and the PDCA cycle is that maybe you will see that a problem, like you will put in place preventive actions so that problems can't occur. And then ACT will also be the management responsibility. With the measurement and analysis, we could see problem and so on. So the management will have the means to act on this problem and plan all over again. That's what we call also continuous improvement. So it will be the responsibility of everyone to maintain effectiveness of the QMS, and you will have to help with the feedback from the regulators and the customers, and always think about the regulators and the customers' requirements, because the objective of your QMS is to build a product that is safe and efficient, and these are the requirements of your stakeholders. So this is kind of a figures of what your QMS should look like. And of course, I said that the QMS are processes interrelated. To prove that you have these processes in place, you will have to document. So that's why there is always the same documentation structure within a QMS. At the beginning of the pyramid is really the quality manual, is the QMS overview, where you put your quality policy, your objectives, and where you can put a map of all of your processes so that you describe the different activities going on in your company. Then you have the procedures, also known as SOPs. It's where you write down how are things done. So in fact, when you have a process, you always have a procedure explaining how the process is going on. So for example, if we take the purchasing process, you will have a procedure to explain who is doing what during a process, and which other processes are related, for example, to the purchasing process. Then maybe you will need some work instructions sometimes. It's when you have very detailed steps to follow when you are applying a procedure. For example, within the purchasing process, you can have a work instruction on how to use the software that you have to use in your company to do a purchase, for example. Then you have forms, like they are kind of templates of documents for uniform recording of the activities. So for example, during the purchasing process, you will have to inspect the purchase product when you will receive it. Maybe you can have a form, because you're going to do that a lot of times when you purchase a product. So you can have a form that can be used for the inspection of the purchased product. And then at the base of the pyramid are the most important documents, the records. The records are really the proof that you're doing what you're saying. During the audits, for example, the auditors will look at the records. They are the results of the activities you're doing. So for example, for the purchasing process, you bought a product. You use the form for the inspection of the purchased product, and the form that you filled in with the results of the inspection will be your record at the end of your purchasing process. As I said, the records are really important, and I don't know if a famous person said that, but everyone say that, and a lot of auditors and FDA inspectors say that. If it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. So I really suggest you document all the results you have during the design and development of your product, that you document all the big decisions about the choice you make during the design and development of the product. It's really important to document all the activities and the results of the activities you're doing. Of course, you won't have to document every choice you make. For example, if you're choosing to buy Indian food for lunch, you don't have to describe that. That's why you have to apply risk-based approach within your QMS. You really have to adapt your quality management activities and the levels of controls you're putting on your activities to the level of risk. You have to balance if your quality management activities are enough with respect to the risk that it can have on the patients, on the user of the product, and also on the regulatory risk. So when I talk about risk-based approach, for example, it can be when you're doing your internal audits. A risk-based auditing method could be, well, the design and development process is really a critical process within for my product. So I'm gonna audit this process twice a year. Whereas my onboarding process, I know that it is low risk because I did it well, so I will audit it only once a year. That's kind of the thing we want you to think when you're doing your quality management activities. Always think of the risk for the user of your product. I will once again take the example of the purchasing process. You will have to put controls on the purchases you're doing. It's a requirement from ISO and the FDA. For example, you will have to put controls on the selection of your supplier and the inspection of the purchased product. But let's take 3 examples. First, you will need a new office chair. It's kind of the same as your lunch. You don't really need to document why you chose the blue chair instead of the red chair, because it does not have an importance on your product or your QMS. But if you buy a component that will be part of your final medical device, or if you're looking for a subcontractor for the manufacturing of your final product, then it's way more critical for your product at the end. So you will need to put real controls on it, because let's take your subcontractor for the manufacturing. If it's not done well, at the end, you're responsible for the product. So you will have to put controls on the selection of supplier. And for example, maybe you will ask your subcontractor to be ISO certified, so that you know that he's gonna follow the same requirements as you. Something that we recommend also is to have a quality agreement with your supplier, so that every time he makes a change, he has to tell you. Because if, for example, for a component that you're going to put into your medical device, if there is a change, maybe if it's a little change, maybe it will have an impact on your medical device. So if your supplier don't tell you, then it's a shame, because maybe it will impact your product at the end. So that's why for a real critical supplier, we recommend that you choose an ISO certified supplier, because it will have the same requirements as you. So I hope it's not too much for you. When you're thinking about creating a QMS, I know it can seem a bit overwhelming, but that's why you have to take step by step. The first thing I think is really important is to define a corporate culture where you document all the results of the activities you're doing. That you have a place where you can put that, for example, a drive, something like that, and that everyone in the company take the habit of documenting the results of his activity. Then, when you're thinking about creating a QMS development, it will be really, really important to identify the team responsible for this project, and of course, to read the requirements and the standards. After that, a good thing to do is to identify the differences between what you're already doing and what you should be doing, what is written in the requirements. And then to update your processes to meet some of the requirements. Because you may think you're far from the requirements, but sometimes the requirements have good sense and you're not that far. So that's why you have to read the requirements. And of course, at the end, you will have to document your processes. So when you look at all of this, it can be a big step to do. That's why we recommend that you only begin with some of the processes. Most of the MedTech startup will be focusing on the design and development and the production of their product. So that's why we think that it's good to begin your QMS creation with these processes. What we recommend is to start with the documents and records control process, and then the design and development process, the risk management process, the change management, and the purchasing and suppliers control process. You will have to look at different standards. As we already said, the ISO standard is the one that is internationally recognized. So for the Canada and for Europe market, it's the one you have to follow. For the US, the 21 CFR. If you're developing a software as a medical device, you will have to look at the more technical standard that is here, and also the risk management is an important standard to follow. What I want you to keep in mind is that through the PDCA cycle, the quality management system will really help you know what you are doing, how you are doing it, and will help you be repeatable and keep traceability. And that's really important when you're developing a medical device. I also want you to remember that you will need to use the risk-based approach so that you don't put controls on things that are not relevant, but you focus on high-risk aspects. So I hope it was a good overview of what is quality management and what is regulatory affairs. I hope you're not too frightened, and maybe to answer a thing that is often thought by people and by engineers in particular is the question how to remain innovative in such a regulated environment. I think the answer would be that everyone should be driven by patient outcomes, which means safety and efficacy of the medical device. Because if everyone is driven by this thought, then you really want to be sure that your product will be efficient and safe. So the QA/RA need to understand that to build a product that is efficient, you need a lot of engineer work, a lot of research and development, and that not all of that should be documented, of course. But engineers should also understand and respect the need for QMS and regulatory affairs, because when you say your product is supposed to do something, you also have to prove that it's doing something. So I really think that if everyone is driven by the patient outcomes, and that if the engineering team and the quality regulatory affairs team are working together, it can really work well. That's the end of my presentation. I hope it was interesting, and I'm open for any question you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clarisse. Very interesting. Let's maybe give well, let's open it up to Q&A at this point. We'll close it at the top of the hour. So if anyone has any questions, please write it in the chat and I will help moderate. So please go ahead. We'll wait a little bit. But maybe we could start with a question I had.
Yeah.
So Clarisse, what was your motivation for starting AVISIO?
Well, the story behind AVISIO, I'm from the more of a research environment. I was part of a research lab at the CHUM, which is the LIO from Jacques de Guise. Maybe you know this professor. He is at ETS. And this is a research lab where a lot of engineers are looking at new innovations, and we have a lot of industry partners. And this lab was the first one to have a QMS, an ISO certified QMS back in 2010, I think. And so then we had a lot of people asking, how did you manage to have a QMS in a research lab? How did you manage to have a QMS compliant to ISO? Just this question. And then there was the creation of the Transmedtech Institute at Polytechnic, and they wanted a QMS, so they asked for help, and we began helping them, and then a lot of companies asked also for help. So we thought, well, this is a business need. So we created AVISIO because I think in Quebec there are a lot of good ideas, a lot of innovation, innovation, also in Canada, but there are not that many people knowing about QMS and regulatory affairs. So we saw there was a need, and in fact, there is a need for QMS awareness and understanding.
Perfect, thank you. So we do have one question here in the chat. The question is, where can I take an ISO 13485 auditor course?
Well, it depends on if you want to audit within your own company or other companies, so doing internal audit or external audit. Internal audit, for example, well, Avisio is giving training for that, but if you need like official certificates so that you allowed to do external audits, then you will need to look at notified bodies or auditing organizations who are giving these kind of trainings. Such as in Canada, you can go to the BSI websites or the Intertech. I will recommend BSI. Just BSI. If you type into Google, you will find their trainings for the auditor courses.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question here. So what advice can you give for someone who wants to start their career in quality and regulations? And then I might add, aside from attending seminars like this and participating in programs like the MedTech Talent Accelerator. So please.
Well, of course, that's the answer. Yes, and I think also navigating into the healthcare ecosystem, knowing about also the challenges that manufacturer of medical devices have to go through, because as I said at the end of my presentation, I really think that our QA people need to understand engineers and the other way around. So I think knowing the market, the medical device market, will be a good way to start. Attending events for medical devices manufacturers, taking courses. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So here's an interesting question. So wondering if you're a supplier of a medical device company or offering them services, do you yourself have to have independent certification, or do the two get certification together? It's an interesting question.
That's really interesting. There are no mandatory certifications for suppliers. The ISO standard says that you can be certified ISO if you're a manufacturer or supplier, and if you have product or service, it's the same thing. You can be certified, but it's not mandatory. But for example, as I said, a lot of manufacturers would like to have suppliers that are ISO certified, because it allows them to do less inspection in their suppliers' facilities, for example, because someone from an audit organization will do it. So I think it is something that you have to discuss with your partner, like if you are a supplier. I know that we have clients that are suppliers of medical device manufacturer because it gives them an edge, like a competitive edge. They can say, hey, we are ISO certified, we understand the requirements you have to follow when you're designing your medical device. So I think it can be a good idea to be ISO certified when you are a supplier for medical device industry.
Perfect. Okay, so we are approaching the top of the hour, so I want to bring this to a close and really take the opportunity to thank you, Clarisse, so much for your excellent talk. I'm sure it was very beneficial and valuable to everyone here. So on behalf of McGill and Ryerson and the MedTech Talent Accelerator program, please, everyone in the audience, join me for giving a virtual round of applause to Clarisse. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. And don't hesitate, feel free to ask me any question on the email address that there is on the screen. I'll be happy to take time to answer.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, thanks again, everyone, for coming, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.